Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman, was indicted on Monday with his longtime associate, Rick Gates, on charges of money laundering and making false statements to officials related to lobbying work in Ukraine. The two men, who pleaded not guilty, are charged with setting up offshore bank accounts and making wire transfers from them to directly pay for goods, services and real estate in the United States. They are said to have done this without disclosing their foreign bank accounts or paying taxes on the income. The indictment lists more than 30 domestic and foreign entities that were involved in the plan. The two men generated tens of millions of dollars lobbying for Ukrainian interests. Paul Manafort wired more than $18 million from offshore accounts to pay for a lavish lifestyle in the United States, according to the indictment. The two men generated tens of millions of dollars lobbying for Ukrainian interests. Paul Manafort wired more than $18 million from offshore accounts to pay for a lavish lifestyle in the United States, according to the indictment. The two men generated tens of millions of dollars lobbying for Ukrainian interests. Paul Manafort wired more than $18 million from offshore accounts to pay for a lavish lifestyle in the United States, according to the indictment. The two men generated tens of millions of dollars lobbying for Ukrainian interests. Mr. Manafort wired more than $18 million from offshore accounts to pay for a lavish lifestyle in the United States, according to the indictment. Source: federal court documents. Over a period of 6 years, the indictment indicates, Mr. Manafort made transfers totaling $6.4 million for real estate and more than $12 million for personal goods and services like clothing, vehicles and home improvement. Real estate payments for Brooklyn Brownstone in Carroll Gardens, $3 million, Arlington, Virginia. House, $1.9 million, Manhattan condominium in Soho, $1.5 million. Home improvement payments to Hamptons, NY Home Improvement Company, $5.4 million. Landscaper, $655,500. Landscaper, $164,740. Audio, video and control system Home Integration and Installation Company, $112,825. Florida Home Automation, Lighting and Entertainment Company, $1.3 million. Contractor, $432,487. Virginia Contractor, $125,650. South Carolina Property Management, $46,000. New York Housekeeping, $20,000. Art and Antiques payments to Alexandria, Virginia. Antique Rug Store, $934,350. Costs related to the Antique Rug Store, $100,000. New York Antique Dealer, $623,910. Florida Art Gallery, $31,900. Clothing payments to New York Men's Clothing Store, $849,215. Beverly Hills, Caliph Clothing Store, $520,440. Cars payments for costs related to 3 Range Rovers, $163,705. Purchase of Mercedes-Benz, $62,750. Purchase of Range Rover, $47,000. Other payments to investment company, $500,000. Total $18.5 million. Source: federal court documents. Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates are also accused of using the accounts to pay more than $2 million to 2 Washington lobbying firms on behalf of their Ukrainian clients, former President Viktor Yanukovych of Ukraine and his pro-Russia party, who they were not registered to represent. Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates developed a cover story to distance themselves from their lobbying activity and mislead agents of the Justice Department who were investigating them, the indictment says. Ukrainian government and political party paid Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates and communicated regularly with them. This mouthpiece for a president of Ukraine was set up as a client of the Washington firms through Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates. The European Center for a Modern Ukraine, the duo selected the firms, communicated with them and paid them over $2 million from offshore accounts. The firms lobbied on behalf of Ukrainian interests, including sanctions, the validity of elections and the imprisonment of a presidential rival. 2 Washington lobbying firms, Ukrainian government and political party, paid Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates and communicated regularly with them. The European Center for a Modern Ukraine, this mouthpiece for a president of Ukraine, was set up as a client of the Washington firms through Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates. The duo selected the firms, communicated with them and paid them over $2 million from offshore accounts. Two Washington lobbying firms. The firms lobbied on behalf of Ukrainian interests, including sanctions, the validity of elections and the imprisonment of a presidential rival. Source: federal court documents. In 2012, Mr. Manafort made wire transfers from the offshore accounts to purchase 3 properties in New York and Virginia, the charges say. The 3 homes and a 4th in the Hamptons are listed in the indictment as subject to forfeiture if he is charged with money laundering. Condo in the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan. Brendan McDermott Reuter's brownstone in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. Brendan McDermott Reuter's house in Arlington, Virginia. Google Street View house in the Hamptons, NY. Google Maps. When Mr. Manafort later took out mortgages on 2 of these properties to obtain cash in the United States, he defrauded the institutions that loaned the money so he could borrow more at better rates, according to the indictment. The indictment says that he purchased the Manhattan condo for $2.85 million and later used it as a rental property. It goes on to say that when he applied for a mortgage for the condo, he falsely claimed that it was a secondary home for his daughter and son-in-law so that he could get a sum larger than the loan available for a rental property. He received a $3.2 million loan. Mr. Manafort purchased the Brooklyn brownstone for about $3 million, and he later was given a construction loan of $5 million, based on his promise that some of the money would go to increasing the home's value. Instead, he told his tax preparer that it would allow him to pay back another mortgage according to the indictment. It also says he used the money to make a down payment on another property in California. Additional work by Tim Wallace, Jeremy Bowers and Sarah Simon.